What paranormal activities have you witnessed? Story 1. One weekend, I was at my dad's house. He'd come to the upstairs bathroom to get a shave and heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. I thought it was him walking around initially, so I got up to find him standing at her closed door. He looks back at me and whispers, "You can hear that too, right?" I nodded and he opened the door slowly. My stepsister was asleep, and never had been awake apparently. There was no way she could have crossed the room, gotten in bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door. He went in, checked her TV which had never been on. She had one of those big ones from the 90s that would get warm when turned on. The radio hadn't been on either. Figured maybe it was the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard the footsteps a bunch of times, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy, they'd shake the ceiling fan of the dining room directly under her bedroom, and they'd woken her up a few times as well whenever I'd shower at my dad's. I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, I got so stressed and paranoid that I refused to shower at the house or even go into the upstairs bathroom. My dad asked me one day, "Do you ever feel like someone's in the shower with you when you're here?" After months of me feeling that way and never mentioning it to anyone. Reply: burn that shit to the ground and condemn the land. Reply 2. This. 100% this. I had the exact same experience in the house I grew up in that my parents swore down was haunted with something really unpleasant after we moved away. Exact same feeling when I was a kid in my mother's room. I constantly felt something staring at me from the corner of the room or directly above me. Absolutely nothing I did could shake off the feeling. Then other family members and guests started telling the exact same story. Either they saw a face staring at them or could feel it. We had loads of other more serious incidents too, including my brother having the covers ripped off him during the night, and the man I saw stood in the laundry room when I was 9 years old, but I don't want to hijack your comment. Story 2. Not sure if this is considered paranormal, but when I get fevers as a child, I would always, in my fugue and pain-infused state, hear a man counting in a very deep voice. He would count from 1 and up. As the numbers get larger, the voice gets louder and more intense. It started to get less frequent as I grew older, and now I do not experience it anymore. I've brushed it aside as a recurring nightmare until only recently, I've learned that my sister would experience the exact same thing when she was younger as well. It's not the scariest thing, but it does send shivers down my spine trying to comprehend this. Reply: it's so weird you say this. My husband had a very bad illness in his third world island country as a child and technically did die for a couple minutes. The fever was so intense that the doctor told my mill to prepare to call for a cremation soon. After he died, he suddenly came back with a gasp, and everyone around him was so shocked, his mother nearly fainted. A couple days later, he was feeling well enough to tell them what he remembered and experienced. He said a tall man in white was counting loudly in his ear, then the counting just stopped. Then the counting started going backwards to 1 again. That's when he woke up. That's about 60 years ago now. Story 3. I work in a cemetery. One evening I had stayed late to do some catch-up work. I was taking pictures of some granite samples to have on my phone and had already locked up. I was alone. As I was holding my phone, I heard the doorway to the basement swing open, slam shut, and heard footsteps go down the stairs. I froze. I thought for sure someone had come in. I called out to see if it was someone from maintenance. No reply. I got scared because if it wasn't them, someone had broken in. I stayed still for a bit and listened, then called out again. Nothing. Finally I got brave enough to look. No one there. I peeked down the basement, empty. All the doors were still locked. Reply: what the hell kind of super evil and scary cemetery has a basement? Story 4. I don't believe in paranormal activity, but my grandparents' house is considered by many to be extremely haunted. It's part of a tour of haunted houses in the LA area and, according to legend, was part of the inspiration for American Horror Story. There are tons of stories, but the one I experienced myself was when I was living there as a child. I was about 6 and my older sister was 12 and we shared a room. My mom had decorated our bedside table with an antique telephone that didn't work and was not plugged in. My sister and I were asleep and for some reason we both woke up at the same time and turned to face each other. I remember feeling an extreme feeling of dread. Then the phone rang in between us. We locked eyes and both hid under our blankets till it stopped ringing. We both thought it was a dream because we didn't say anything for years about it. Then one day she was talking about it and we realized we had had the exact same experience. There are so many more stories, but that's the only one I experienced directly. Reply. How do you make those truths jibe? I too am atheist and don't believe in the spiritual, supernatural, but I had the oddest experience at my mom's house. She and my sister were convinced it was haunted. I never lived there, built after I moved away to college, but I did come back home for a while mom was going through a divorce. They always complained that the upstairs was haunted. Faucets turning on and off, doors moving, that sort of thing. I chalked it up to faulty construction and a lean to the house, but one day I was taking a shower and I had a soft thump from the bedroom. Wrapped up my shower and the bath towel, which had been setting on the sink, was balled up and chucked across the room into a bookshelf at least 10 feet away. I was home alone at the time and I have no idea what happened. Story 5. When I was 3, I told my parents that my great-grandmother came to me in a dream and said her feet didn't hurt anymore. I think she had problems due to diabetes or something. She had died that night. They received the call shortly after I told them. Not paranormal, but a spooky coincidence. Reply. How nice of grandma to tell you she wasn't in pain anymore instead of outright saying she's fucking dead. Still freaky though. Story 6. My family's old house backed onto a pretty substantial, forested ravine. I slept on the ground level floor, and my room was at the back of the house. On 4 separate occasions, over the span of 5 years, I saw a middle-aged man dressed in a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and a red hat walk through my room with a dog leash in his hand. He would briefly stop at the same spot every time, and look around, then keep walking towards the ravine. I should note that this was fairly new construction in a suburb of a small city, and all that had been there previously was forest. I think he lost his dog in the ravine at some point, and he was there trying to find it. Reply. It's stories like these that make me think paranormal activity is just a past timeline that somehow got stuck in a loophole in a certain area. They're just entirely random. Like a random guy looking for his dog. For example, if I'm at home, sitting on the couch and typing this comment on Reddit, maybe in 100 years, someone will see a sort of echo of me doing this exact thing. Reply 2. Space-time vortices. There's one at my friend's house. You go there at 8 p.m. for a drink or two and next thing you know it's 3 a.m. Nobody ever knows what happened to the time in between. Story 7. When I was 6, I slept on a bunk bed in a room alone. The bottom bunk was empty. Was meant for my younger brother, but he was too scared of sleeping in a bed alone. So I was alone in that room that night. I remember a chilling feeling that night, then it suddenly got really warm. Probably because I was undergoing a night terror of some sort. Then I start breathing heavily and open my eyes and see the room is empty. My little night light in the corner of the room comforts me back to sleep. Except as I closed my eyes I felt a heavy hand petting my shoulder. My eyes rip open and there was no one in the room. As soon as I lay back down, the petting continued and I covered my head just pretending to myself that it was my mom. It took me 12 years to stop sleeping with my head under the covers because of that memory. My mom, of course, knew a woman passed away in that apartment before we moved in, so she always believed it was that woman trying to comfort me. Story 8. At my mom's old apartment I used to have this feeling I was always being watched. Then I was starting to wake up at 3 a.m. consistently. On one of the nights I had woken up I heard someone call out my name. It was a woman's voice but I didn't recognize it. She kept calling out my name and walking towards my bed, getting closer, but I didn't see anything. I freaked out, jumped off my bed, and ran into my brother's room. I hopped into bed with him and tried waking him up. The punk sleeps like the dead, he still sleeps like that. I heard her footsteps follow me until his doorway. After that, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I just ran into his room and slept on the top bunk. We had bunk beds. My mother still doesn't believe that happened. Thankfully, we only lived there for a couple of months, then moved out. Story 9. Saw a BMW driver use a turn signal. Reply. Now, there's no need to make things up. Hey, stop. You're cool. Subscribe for more.